How to qualify for Solo Victory Cup finals in Season 4. The qualification spots have now changed. On EU, you will now need top 15,000 to advance. On NA, top 10,000. Brazil, top 2,500. Middle East, top 2,000. And OCE and Asia, both top 1,500. This means this season will be twice as easy to qualify for NA and EU. Brazil will be slightly easier as there's 500 more qualification spots than last season. There's no changes to Middle East, but OCE and Asia both lose 500 qualification spots, meaning it will be harder. As always, the way I recommend to find how many points you need is to look at the last most relevant tournament with the same point format. So in this case, it would be the last Solo Cash Cup from last season. Top 15k for EU in that Cash Cup would have been 109 points. NA top 10k would have been 107, Brazil top 2,500 would have been 111, Middle East top 2,000, 120, OCE 102 and Asia 108. Only use this as a guideline and always try and get more points than this. You should be doing this anyway, as you should always try and get as many points as possible. This will result in more PR. Before talking about what you do in your games, let's talk about when to start. Historically, it was always feasible to late start. In some seasons, it was even more beneficial to do so, and we even saw top pros like Mitro and Mongrel use this technique. However, in the last few seasons, it's not really been feasible because of the new point formats in most tournaments, like the Solo Victory Cup. It's 65 points for a win and only 1 point per elimination, meaning you'd need to get a 65 kill game to equal a 0 kill win. The whole point of late starts was that it was easy to drop high kill wins, but now these tournaments are so placement heavy, it's very hard to catch up. If you're starting around an hour late, someone could have already had 3 good endgames and be nearly qualified. But of course, if you have commitments and have to start late, it is still doable, just way harder. Right, so now you're in the battle bus for your first game, what do you do? As we said previously, the most important thing is getting a win. If you were to get a 0 kill win, this would already be over half the points needed to qualify. Not only that, but getting an early win in a tournament is a great boost for your mentality. You're going to have better morale and confidence. Therefore, play better in your next games. Whereas we all know what it feels like to start a tournament bad, it can ruin your whole tournament. Secondary to this, the next best thing to get is kills. Although 1 point, they still make a big difference, which is why you often see pros at the top of the leaderboard because they're so good at fighting and drop a lot of kills. This is when knowing what playstyle you are makes a huge difference. If you're an aggressive player who's good at fighting and is always seeing success W keying, then you should look to take a lot of fights and get the majority of your kills in this game, as the first games are generally easier lobbies. Whereas if you are a passive player and find most of your success playing for endgame and you're not that confident fighting, then it's okay to play for the win. And it should be easy to do first game because it's generally dead as everyone else is W keying, meaning there will be no storm surge, so you can play with 0 damage, aka just camping and hiding. The benefits of doing this is you'll have max mats and heals going into endgames, so you're guaranteed a better placement. Playstyle is also a massive factor when considering drops and loadouts. The strong fighters can land at big POIs that are going to be heavily contested, but will benefit through early kills and better loot, especially if they choose to land on one of the free mythics and medallions. These are often also the players that fight for forecast towers, bunkers and island, and in turn helps their games. Whereas passive players should choose low-key split drops where they can guaranteed endgames, which is their strengths. They aren't going to get as many kills or as good loot by doing this, but they benefit from getting a lot of points through consistently getting to endgames. Whereas those aggressive players are obviously taking a lot more fights and there's more risk of dying and not making endgames. Loadout wise, the aggressive players are going to be in way more fights and have more close combat. But I'd recommend the Gatekeeper, which is perfect for getting in people's box. And also they need a lot of fighting heals, which are quick to pop, like minis and chugs. Whereas for the passive players, I've always found pumps to be better on defense, as you could get big counter damage shots. First game is very important as it's going to dictate the rest of your tournament a lot. If you win or have a really good game, you're going to be in high elo, which is a low percentage on the leaderboard. I class this as top 1 to 2%, which in solo victories is normally around top 1,000. If this is you, your next games are going to be much harder. The opponents are going to be way better and the lobbies are going to be more stacked, most requiring storm surge. If you try to continue W keying in these lobbies, the fights are going to be really long because you're playing against other good players, which means there's more chance of third parties, but also you're going to use more resource like builds and heals. This will make the rest of your game scuffed and you likely probably won't even get to endgame, meaning you get no placement points. Instead, everyone should play passive in these these lobbies, playing for endgame. However, as I mentioned, there will be Storm Surge concerns. A lot of people make the mistake of thinking they need to get into full fights to get Storm Surge. No, you don't. With DMR removed this season, it is a lot harder to get long range tags. But it is possible with the new Monarch pistols, which is basically the replacement of DMRs with all the same stats, just without the sights. You can also get thermal scopes on your ARs, just a lot of recoil and not as much damage as the DMRs did. Pair this with well-positioned Storm Surge bases and you're going to be just fine, especially in solos where you don't need a lot of damage. In these stack games, through good rotates, positioning and refarming, you should be able to go into endgame with good mats, which is going to get you way better placement. In these endgames where there's so many players, you're going to use a lot of materials, so make sure you don't leave getting a refresh too late. In the new no rotation meta, it's key that you have a fizz, especially in the mid-game rotates when it pulls max distance. As with all seasons, you shouldn't even really waste time going into endgame without rotation. If you don't have one, try and get a kill, or you can take risks like trying to get bunkers. This is called good game and time management. It's basically ensuring you don't just spend loads of time in your game scuffed to get minimal points. We've all had them games where you're about 20 minutes in just before endgame and you end up dying and only receive a few points. This isn't as bad in 3-hour tournaments like Duo Cash Cups, but in 2-hour tournaments like the Solo Victory Cup, this can be devastating. Having a big game and then consistently getting endgames in the games after should mean you are already qualified or very close. However, let's now get into what to do if the complete opposite happens and you have a bad start to the tournament and can't get that big game. There's two completely different ways of getting back into the tournament and qualifying. The first being to keep going for this big pop-off game until you get it. However, the risk of this is you keep dying and burn through your games and it never comes. However, the benefits is if you do it in just the one game, you will fly up the leaderboard and then in the following games you can build on this. The other technique is just to stay patient but be consistent and slowly creep back into the leaderboard. An example of this would be being in low elo but knowing you have about 3 or 4 good games you can play out. If you do fairly well in each one, you'll be able to qualify. You're not going to shoot up the leaderboard, but this can actually be beneficial as the lobbies are going to be worse with easier players and less stacked games. Mentality is one of the most important things in these solo victory cups because as you know, solos is the most stressful game mode in Fortnite. But you can use this to your advantage. If you keep a cool head whilst everyone else is raging, you're going to have the upper hand. Instead of raging after every death and making excuses, try and see what you can improve and fix for the next game. Staying calm but having a bit of confidence is going to make you play the best. But this is easier said than done, so just find what works for you. Some people chew gum, some people like to go and cool with their friends. That wraps up the video, guys. I hope you enjoyed this longer video. If you did, make sure to show me by leaving a like. And I'd really like to thank them loyal viewers who stayed and watched the whole video, so comment finals if you're still here. To make sure you don't miss any more videos like this on how to qualify, make sure to follow and subscribe and turn on them notifications.